Hey everyone, before the Sinister review, I quickly want to go back to the Clown House review. I forgot to shout out who suggested the movie, so I figured I should do it in this video. Ashley, thank you very much for suggesting Clown House. I did enjoy it, and yeah, keep on suggesting. Let's get to the review. Sinister was released in 2012 and was directed by Scott Derrickson. It stars Ethan Hawke as a true crime writer who recently moves into a house of a family that was murdered. In the attic, he finds a box of tapes, and what's on those tapes can put himself and his family at risk. I'm really excited to talk about Sinister because this is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. It's a really scary movie. I remember when I was in middle school, my friend Paul recommended me to watch it. And back then, I was so afraid of horror movies, I would not watch them. If they were on the channel, I would quickly turn them off because I would have nightmares. But 2 years ago, I watched this movie in its entirety. And man, did it deliver. It is one of the scariest movies I have ever seen. And watching it last night, all the emotions came back. It's such a great horror movie. It's well made. The acting in this movie is phenomenal. Ethan Hawke as the true crime writer Ellison is amazing. The plot itself is really crazy when you come to think about it, but he takes it very seriously, and you could see that in his role, which makes you really feel that this is really serious, and it just delivers. And there's so much backstory to his character and his wife, and she probably has the most underrated performance of this entire movie. The actress is Juliet Rylance, and man, does she have quite the performance. She plays his wife, and she's really skeptical about moving to this new house, and she doesn't even want to know, like, if this was a house of a previous murder or if they're near one. She just wants her family and for him to take care of the family. But right now, he's a little bit too focused on writing his book because he thinks this is his last chance to stay famous. So there's a really nice dynamic between them, and it amounts to some really nice fights.
Oh, you're insane! And you're winning!
Throughout the movie, and the acting in those fights are just so great. Another positive about this movie is the death scenes. It knows exactly how much to show and what not to show. A lot of the deaths are very gruesome, but they do a good job of showing you enough so you can get disturbed by these deaths, but not enough where it's going to show blood and guts where you're going to be having to look away and not look at the screen. I mean, it really captures your eyes and really draws you to look at every small detail of whenever these death scenes occur. By far, one of the biggest positives of the movie is the camera work. The cinematography is absolutely gorgeous, and it just knows when to turn away from shots, when to zoom in on something, when to linger a little bit too long so you start to feel a little disturbed and uncomfortable by how long it's lingering. He just does a great job with every single shot, and you could tell that he really cared about what he was shooting. The music adds another interesting layer to this movie. During some of the tapes, you hear a slight instrumental background, but it's not like your normal instrumental background, like hearing a flute section or stuff like that. It's very atonal sounding, and it's just really creepy noises, and it just adds so much to so many parts of the movies. The tapes would not be as creepy without this music. I mean, it really just gets under your skin and just makes you, you feel your heart start to beat faster. And if your music is doing that, that adds so much to a movie. One of my favorite positives to this movie is that it never makes the audience feel dumb. Some movies, some terrible movies, decide to have Google research scenes a lot, where a main character will go to a library and start to read books and learn about an entity or a monster. But in this, it never does that. Whenever there's a research scene, it feels necessary to the plot for it to be there. For example, one of the research scenes is figuring out how to turn Super 8 film to digital. And that's really clever because the tapes themselves are on this Super 8 film reel, and it starts to get destroyed, and he needs to figure out how to play it. So he looks up how to play it, and it makes so much sense having that. But during that scene, there's so much tension, and the music starts to add up in the background, and you could feel it start to get more tense as he's trying to get this Super 8 film to digital because he thinks he sees something. which I thought was very clever. Now that we talked about some positives, let's get to some negatives. The first nitpick that I have with this movie is the amount of fog. It feels like I'm watching Saw when they'd be in like an abandoned warehouse, but there would be fog everywhere, and you would just question, how is there fog in this warehouse right now? That's what it feels like in this movie. Whenever it's nighttime, it just feels like a fog machine is just blowing so much smoke into the air, and it gets kind of distracting at some points just because you're like, it's nighttime and there's fog again. And I know it's just such a small nitpick, but it just automatically made me think of Saw with that, so I thought I should mention it. Another nitpick that I have with this movie is some of the jump scares. During the middle of the movie, it resorts to having a loud noise as the jump scare.
I found dates back to the 60s.
Which was kind of disappointing just because in the beginning and in the end, there's no loud noise for jump scares. It just, boom, right on the screen gets you. But during the middle, they kind of resort to more loud sound jump scares, which kind of is distracting and a cheap way to get a scare out of someone. But a few of them are warranted, and there's one specific moment where there's a very loud jump scare, and it's warranted, and I'm not going to spoil it, but you'll know when you get that jump scare, because that is one of the most terrifying scenes of this movie, and it's during the middle. One last small nitpick that I have with this movie is some of the cheesy jump scares that they have in it. I know I already talked about the loud noise jump scares, but there's a few cheesy ones that are in the middle of it as well. There's one specific where he's looking at a picture and he turns away and the picture moves.
Early Christians believed that Bagul actually lived in the images themselves and that they were gateways into his realm.
And it feels like they want the audience to be like, oh, the picture moved, you have to turn around and see. But honestly, it was just really corny, and it didn't add anything. One thing I do want to talk about, though, is one of the characters who's referred to as Mr. Boogie. Mr. Boogie is probably one of the corniest names for your villain, but oh my god, is he terrifying. I mean, I think the fact that it's such a childish name and it's such a scary entity that you see throughout this movie, just the two tones contrast so much that it makes you uncomfortable and disturbs you. And I feel like that's what really makes the character of Mr. Boogie scary, because if I were to tell you that the main antagonist of this movie was called Mr. Boogie, you probably wouldn't be that scared. But since there's children involved and he does look pretty scary, although some of the makeup is a little wonky in a few shots, but not really that much of a nitpick. He is very terrifying. But while watching it, it reminded me a little bit of the Bye Bye Man. And if you're being compared to the Bye Bye Man, that's probably not a good thing. And I'm definitely not comparing Sinister to the Bye Bye Man, because boy oh boy, that would be really bad. But the Bye Bye Man kind of looks like a cracked out Mr. Boogie. I don't know how to describe it, but I feel like the Bye Bye Man definitely took influence from Sinister and Mr. Boogie and tried to make its own scary entity, but completely failed in the process. I don't know why, I just thought I should mention it because I thought that was pretty funny. I mean, Tina, if you want to throw up on the screen at some point, Mr. Boogie, right here. And if you want to throw up the Bye Bye Man, right here. I mean, you could see it. This is what happens if you do coke. Overall, I would give this movie a 9.75 out of 10. And would I recommend it? Definitely. This is by far one of the best horror movies that came out in the 2010s. And probably, I would put it in my top 5 list of all time. So thank you very much for watching. If you want me to watch Sinister 2, which is on Netflix, let me know in the comment section below. And let me know any other horror suggestions you have. I mean, I love horror movies, I love reviewing them. And who knows, maybe you'll get a shout out in the next video. So, thank you again, and let's flash forward to the next review.